Chapter 16 of The Monster Men by Edgar Rice Burroughs. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Monster Men, Chapter 16. Sing Speaks. For a week, Professor Maxon with Von Horn and Sing sought for Virginia. They could get no help from the natives of the Longhouse, who feared the vengeance of Mudasafir should he learn that they had aided the white men upon his trail. And always as the three hunted through the jungle and up and down the river, there lurked ever near a handful of the men of the tribe of the two whom Von Horn had murdered, waiting for the chance that would give them revenge and the heads of the three they followed. They feared the guns of the white men too much to venture an open attack, and at night the quarry never abated their watchfulness, so that days dragged on, and still the three continued their hopeless quest unconscious of the relentless foe that dogged their footsteps. Von Horn was always searching for an opportunity to enlist the aid of the friendly natives in an effort to regain the chest, but so far he had found none who would agree to accompany him even in consideration of a large share of the booty. It was the treasure alone which kept him to the search for Virginia Maxon, and he made it a point to direct the hunt always in the vicinity of the spot where it was buried, for a great fear consumed him that Nanaka might return and claim it before he had a chance to make away with it. 3 times during the week they returned and slept at the Longhouse, hoping each time to learn that the natives had received some news of her they sought, through the wonderful channels of communication that seemed always open across the trackless jungle and up and down the savage, lonely rivers. For 2 days Boulain lay raving in the delirium of fever, while the delicate girl, unused to hardship and exposure, watched over him and nursed him with the loving tenderness and care of a young mother with her firstborn. For the most part, the young giant's ravings were inarticulate, but now and then Virginia heard her name linked with the words of reverence and worship. The man fought again the recent battles he had passed through, and again suffered the long night watches beside the sleeping girl who filled his heart. Then it was that she learned the truth of his self-sacrificing devotion. The thing that puzzled her most was the repetition of a number and a name which ran through all his delirium. 999, Priscilla. She could make neither head nor tail of it, nor was there another word to give a clue to its meaning. So at last, from constant repetition, it became a commonplace, and she gave it no further thought. The girl had given up hope that Boulain ever could recover, so weak and emaciated had he become, and when the fever finally left him quite suddenly, she was positive that it was the beginning of the end. It was on the morning of the 7th day since they had commenced their wandering in search of the Longhouse that, as she sat watching him, she saw his eyes resting upon her face with a look of recognition. Gently she took his hand, and at the act he smiled at her very weakly. "You are better, Boulain," she said. "You have been very sick, but now you shall soon be well again." She did not believe her own words, yet the mere saying of them gave her renewed hope. "Yes," replied the man, "I shall soon be well again. How long have I been like this?" "For 2 days," she replied. "And you have watched over me alone in the jungle for 2 days?" he asked incredulously. "Had it been for life," she said in a low voice, "it would scarce have repaid the debt I owe you." For a long time he lay looking up into her eyes, longingly, wistfully. "I wish that it had been for life," he said. At first she did not quite realize what he meant, but presently the tired and hopeless expression of his eyes brought to her a sudden knowledge of his meaning. "Oh, Boulain," she cried, "you must not say that. Why should you wish to die?" "Because I love you, Virginia," he replied, "and because, when you know what I am, you will hate and loathe me." On the girl's lips was an avowal of her own love, but as she bent closer to whisper the words in his ear, there came the sound of men crashing through the jungle, and as she turned to face the peril that she thought approaching, Von Horn sprang into view, while directly behind him came her father and Sing Lee. Bulan saw them at the same instant, and as Virginia ran forward to greet her father, he staggered weakly to his feet. Von Horn was the first to see the young giant, and with an oath sprang toward him, drawing his revolver as he came. "You beast!" he cried. "We have caught you at last!" At the words, Virginia turned back toward Bulan with a little scream of warning and of horror. Professor Maxon was behind her. "Shoot the monster, Von Horn," he ordered. "Do not let him escape." Bulan drew himself to his full height, and though he wavered from weakness, yet he towered mighty and magnificent above the evil-faced man who menaced him. "Shoot," he said calmly. "Death cannot come too soon now." At the same instant, Von Horn pulled the trigger. The giant's head fell back, he staggered, whirled about, and crumpled to the earth just as Virginia Maxon's arms closed about him. Von Horn rushed close and, pushing the girl aside, pressed the muzzle of his gun to Bulan's temple, but an avalanche of wrinkled, yellowed skin was upon him before he could pull the trigger a second time, and Sing had hurled him back a dozen feet and snatched his weapon. Moaning and sobbing, Virginia threw herself upon the body of the man she loved, while Professor Maxon hurried to her side to drag her away from the soulless thing for whom he had once intended her. Like a tigress, the girl turned upon the two white men. "You are murderers!" she cried. "Cowardly murderers! Weak and exhausted by fever, he could not combat you, so you have robbed the world of one of the noblest men that God ever created." "Hush!" cried Professor Maxon. "Hush, child! You do not know what you say. The thing was a monster, a soulless monster." At the words, the girl looked up quickly at her father, a faint realization of his meaning striking her like a blow in the face. "What do you mean?" she whispered. "Who was he?" It was Von Horn who answered. "No god created that," he said, with a contemptuous glance at the still body of the man at their feet. "He was one of the creatures of your father's mad experiments, the soulless thing for whose arms his insane obsession doomed you. The thing at your feet, Virginia, was number 13. With a piteous little moan, the girl turned back toward the body of the young giant. A faltering step she took toward it, and then, to the horror of her father, she sank upon her knees beside it, and lifting the young man's head in her arms, covered the face with kisses. "Virginia!" cried the professor. "Are you mad, child?" "I am not mad," she moaned. "Not yet. I love him. Man or monster, it would have been all the same to me, for I loved him." Her father turned away, burying his face in his hands. "God," he muttered, "what an awful punishment you have visited upon me for the sin of the thing I did." The silence which followed was broken by Sing, who had kneeled opposite Virginia upon the other side of Bulan, where he was feeling the giant's wrists and pressing his ear close above his heart. "Don't cry, Linny," said the kindly old Chinaman. "Him no dead." Then, as he poured a pinch of brownish powder into the man's mouth from a tiny sack he had brought forth from the depths of one of his sleeves, "Him no monster either, Linny. Him white man, or say Maxon. Sing no." The girl looked up at him in gratitude. "He is not dead, Sing? He will live?" she cried. "I don't care anything else, Sing, if you will only make him live." "Him live. Get 'em lily flesh wounds, that's all." "What do you mean by saying that he is not a monster?" demanded Von Horn. "You waitee, you damn fool," cried Sing. "I tell a lot more I know. You waitee I fixie him, and then, by God, I fixie you." Von Horn took a menacing step toward the Chinaman, his face black with wrath, but Professor Maxon interposed. "This has gone quite far enough, Dr. Von Horn," he said. "It may be that we acted hastily. I do not know, of course, what Sing means, but I intend to find out. He has been very faithful to us, and deserves every consideration." Von Horn stepped back, still scowling. Singh poured a little water between Boulan's lips, and then asked Professor Maxon for his brandy flask. With the first few drops of the fiery liquid, the giant's eyelids moved, and a moment later he raised them and looked about him. The first face he saw was Virginia's. It was full of love and compassion. "They have not told you yet?" he asked. "Yes," she replied, "they have told me, but it makes no difference. You have given me the right to say it, Boulan, and I do say it now again, before them all. I love you, and that is all there is that makes any difference." A look of happiness lighted his face momentarily, only to fade as quickly as it had come. "No, Virginia," he said sadly. "It would not be right. It would be wicked. I am not a human being. I am only a soulless monster. You cannot mate with such as I. You must go away with your father. Soon you will forget me." "Never, Boulan!" cried the girl determinedly. The man was about to attempt to dissuade her when Singh interrupted. "You keep still, Boulan," he said. "You wait till Singh tell. You no monster. Maxon, he no make you. Singh, he find you in low boat just outside the cove. You dummy. You know nothing. No name. No where coming from. No talkie. Singh, he just hearing Maxon tell Horny about number 13. How he make him for Linny. Make Linny marry him. Singh, he know what kind of freaks Maxon make. Linny always good to old Singh. Singh, he been peeking through crack in wall. See big vat where 13 growing. Singh, he take you to Singh's shack that night. Hide you till everybody sleep. Then he sneak you in workshop. Kick it over vat. Leaves you. Next morning, Maxon make a big hullabaloo. Dance up and down. Whoop! 13 come too soon, but all right. Him finey, perfect man. Whoop! Anyway, you heap better for Lenny than one Maxon's fleeks," he concluded, turning toward Boulan. "You are lying, you yellow devil!" cried Von Horn. The Chinaman turned his shrewd, slant eyes malevolently upon the doctor. "Sing lies?" he hissed. "Maybe so Sing lies when he asks what for you get Bludin steal treasure. But Laja Sophia he come and spoil it all while you try get Linny to the ship. Sing knows. Then you tell him Maxon 13 steal Linny. You lie then, and you knew you lie. You lie again when 13 save a Linny from orangutan. You say you save a Linny. Then you make bad talkie with Laja Sophia at Longhouse. Sing hear you all time. You try get a treasure away from Dilax for yourself. Then—" "Stop!" roared Von Horn. "Stop, you lying yellow sneak, before I put a bullet in you!" "Both of you may stop now," said Professor Maxon authoritatively. "There have been charges made here that cannot go unnoticed. Can you prove these things, Singh?" he asked, turning to the Chinaman. "I prove much by Bludin's Lascar. Bludin tell him all about Horny. I prove some more by Dayak Chief at Longhouse. He knows lots. Laja Sophia tell him. It all true, Maxon." "And is it true about this man? The thing that you have told us is true? He is not one of those created in the laboratory?" "No, Maxon. You no make a fine young man like Boulan. You know that, Maxon. You make a 1, 2, 3, all up to 12. All freaks. You ought to know, Maxon, that you no can make a Boulan." During these revelations, Boulan had sat with his eyes fixed upon the Chinaman. There was a puzzled expression upon his wan, blood-streaked face. It was as though he were trying to wrest from the inner temple of his consciousness a vague and tantalizing memory that eluded him each time he felt that he had it within his grasp, the key to the strange riddle that hid his origin. The girl kneeled close beside him, one small hand in his. Hope and happiness had supplanted the sorrow in her face. She tore the hem from her skirt to bandage the bloody furrow that creased the man's temple. Professor Maxon stood silently by, watching the loving tenderness that marked each deft little movement of her strong, brown hands. The revelations of the past few minutes had shocked the old man into stupefied silence. It was difficult, almost impossible, for him to believe that Singh had spoken the truth, and that this man was not one of the creatures of his own creation. Yet, from the bottom of his heart, he prayed that it might prove the truth, for he saw that his daughter loved the man with a love that would be stayed by no obstacle or bound by no man-made law or social custom. The Chinaman's indictment of Van Horn had come as an added blow to Professor Maxon, but it had brought its own supporting evidence in the flood of recollections it had induced in the professor's mind. Now he recalled 100 chance incidents and conversations with his assistant that pointed squarely toward the man's disloyalty and villainy. He wondered that he had been so blind as not to have suspected his lieutenant long before. Virginia had at last succeeded in adjusting her rude bandage and stopping the flow of blood. Boulain had risen weakly to his feet. The girl supported him upon one side and Singh upon the other. Professor Maxon approached the little group. "I do not know what to make of all that Singh has told us," he said. "If you are not number 13, who are you? Where did you come from? It seems very strange indeed, impossible in fact. However, if you will explain who you are, I shall be glad to consider permitting you to pay court to my daughter." "I do not know who I am," replied Boulain. "I had always thought that I was only number 13 until Singh just spoke. Now I have a faint recollection of drifting for days upon the sea in an open boat. Beyond that all is blank. I shall not force my attentions upon Virginia until I can prove my identity, and that my past is one which I can lay before her without shame. Until then I shall not see her." "You shall do nothing of the kind," cried the girl. "You love me, and I you. My father intended to force me to marry you while he still thought you were a soulless thing. Now that it is quite apparent that you are a human being and a gentleman, he hesitates, but I do not. As I have told you before, it makes no difference to me what you are. You have told me that you love me. You have demonstrated a love that is high and noble and self-sacrificing. More than that, no girl needs to know. I am satisfied to be the wife of Boulain, if Boulain is satisfied to have the daughter of the man who has so cruelly wronged him." An arm went around the girl's shoulders and drew her close to the man she had glorified with her loyalty and her love. The other hand was stretched out toward Professor Maxon. "Professor," said Boulain, "in the face of what Singh has told us, in the face of a disinterested comparison between myself and the miserable creatures of your experiments, is it not folly to suppose that I am one of them? Some day I shall recall my past. Until that time shall prove my worthiness, I shall not ask for Virginia's hand, and in this decision she must concur, for the truth might reveal some insurmountable obstacle to our marriage. In the meantime, let us be friends, Professor, for we are both actuated by the same desire, the welfare and happiness of your daughter." The old man stepped forward and took Boulain's hand. The expression of doubt and worry had left his face. "I cannot believe," he said, "that you are other than a gentleman, and if, in my desire to protect Virginia, I have said aught to wound you, I ask your forgiveness." Boulain responded only with a tighter pressure of the hand. "And now," said the professor, "let us return to the Long-House. I wish to have a few words in private with you, Van Horn." And he turned to face his assistant, but the man had disappeared. "Where is Dr. Van Horn?" exclaimed the scientist, addressing Singh. "Horn, him vamoose long time go," replied the Chinaman. He hear all he like." Slowly the little party wound along the jungle trail, and in less than a mile, to Virginia's infinite surprise, came out upon the river and the longhouse that she and Bouland had searched for in vain. "And to think," she cried, "that all these awful days we have been almost within sound of your voices! What a strange freak of fate sent you to us today!" "We had about given up hope," replied her father, "when Singh suggested to me that we cut across the highlands that separate this valley from the one adjoining it upon the northeast, where we should strike other tribes and from them glean some clue to your whereabouts, in case your abductors had attempted to carry you back to the sea by another route. This seemed likely in view of the fact that we were assured by enemies of Muda Safir that you were not in his possession, and that the river we were bound for would lead your captors most quickly out of the domains of that rascally Malay. You may imagine our surprise, Virginia, when after proceeding for but a mile we discovered you." No sooner had the party entered the veranda of the longhouse than Professor Maxon made inquiries for Von Horn, only to learn that he had departed upstream in a prow with several warriors whom he had engaged to accompany him on a hunting expedition, having explained that the white girl had been found and was being brought to the longhouse. The chief further explained that he had done his best to dissuade the white man from so rash an act, as he was going directly into the country of the tribe of the 2 men he had killed, and there was little chance that he would ever come out alive. While they were still discussing Von Horn's act, and wondering at his intentions, a native on the veranda cried out in astonishment, pointing down the river. As they looked in the direction he indicated, all saw a graceful white cutter gliding around a nearby turn. At the oars were white-clad American sailors, and in the stern 2 officers in the uniform of the United States Navy. End of Chapter 16.